Entrepreneur, author, and financial consultant Mark Bernstein helps high-performing entrepreneurial business owners create a vision for the future and follow through on their goals and intentions. Ange Honorato is a business growth strategist who blends psychology and business together to create conscious leaders and business owners who impact the world. Founders Forum is a radio show podcast sharing the real stories behind entrepreneurship as founders discover more about themselves while providing valuable lessons and some fun and entertainment for you. Now, here's Mark and Ange.
Good morning, America. How are you this morning? Good morning, America. How are you? How are you, Arlo? How are you, Ange? How you doing? I know you had a rough flight day flying yesterday.
Yeah, it's been some travel nightmares, but, that's Thanksgiving travel, I guess. So glad to be home for now.
Good morning to Jill Michal, our guest today.
Good morning.
And we will introduce Jill in a moment. But I was just thinking about the fact that when I used to think of the word resilience, which we've talked about on the show before, I used to think about tough times I was in and how I had to be resilient, or certain people I knew that went through real struggles and they had to be resilient and come back from that. But now I hear that word all the time, almost every day. And I'm realizing that it seems like in a lot of ways business has gotten harder. People are having family issues, health issues. Ange, I know you have several family members with COVID. I had the effects of the shot yesterday, which felt like COVID. And that was a struggle for a day. It's unfortunately fine today. But it just seemed things going on in the world events. I mean, there's tragedies all around in the Middle East and people that are going to spend lifetimes recovering from those tragedies. And so I'm just thinking about resilience instead of something that you have to summon up every once in a while. It may be something that you almost have to use on a daily basis. So I would like to hear from both of you on your thoughts about that. Ange, you want to go first?
Yeah, Mark, it's a great topic that you brought back up again, because as we shared offline, we did talk about this a couple months ago. But as I was mentioning going through some business struggles, which honestly I thought would be, in a different position in just a few months, but it's really, really taken a lot longer. And it's, to your point, it's required me to kind of be more resilient than even I had prepared and thought. So I think a lot of people are in that space. And then when you add in a lot of the things you mentioned, family, caregiving, national, global events, it is a daily practice for sure.
We also, I have a new company as of a year ago and working with a lot of the same people I've worked with for years, but new company, new vision. And we had this very grandiose vision. And we did it for a year and a half, 6 months before we started the company, and then since then. And recently we decided to reset, that we realized that while it was attainable, we had other things we needed to do first. So we had to kind of reset, go back to sort of our original vision with some revisions. And that required some resilience and adjustment by my partners and our staff and everybody. So we've gone through that. Jill, how about you? What occurs to you about this?
Oh, man. Well, you know this as an entrepreneur, right? I think I was reading some article that said every entrepreneur goes through at least a dozen near-death experiences, right? And so, resilience, I've never required more resilience than I have in this role. But to your point, it just kind of now becomes one of your core skill sets versus, to your point, something you as you said, summon up. Right. You got to summon it up every morning when you get out. You're like, all right, I'm going to do this, right? I'm going to do this again today. And it takes a lot.
Well, I am a believer in, and I know Ange does similar things. I do these I am statements. I remind myself of what I am and what I'm made of. I did them this morning before I came here. Because sometimes you wake up in the morning and it's like you forget who you are. Forget what you're about. And those reminders, it gives me strength every day. And it's, people pray. I do some of that too. But there's a lot of things you can do to kind of summon up that power every day. I don't know if you have any routine about that, Jill. Or
I don't know that I do. Right? I mean, there's a lot of routine, right? There's a lot of things that I do to keep my world kind of calm and focused. And I think that's how I do it, right? For me, it's trying to figure out how to reduce the distraction or at least set it aside and recognize the difference so that I can really try to focus on what matters.
I do know you have some things like that because I know you have quotes that you use.
Yeah.
And we'll get to those, but I know you have quotes that are very motivational to you. That
Absolutely.
That I think you kind of, hold up when you need them, kind of thing. So, so let me introduce Jill Michal. She is CEO and co-founder of Kith and Kin, and she will explain what that means in a minute. But I want to read you in the third person her bio that she wrote. I don't always like to read, but I'm going to read this because I love the way it's written. She is champion for the human at the center of every healthcare journey, on a crusade to bring a sense of confidence and control to individuals and families who want health to be done with them and not to them. As a wife and mother of 3 children, she's been the Kinkeeper for decades, the one in charge of everyone's health, playing air traffic control for all the appointments and reminders and central intelligence, making sure she knows what they need to know, and when they need to know it. She started Kith and Kin when she realized that health is a team sport. And in her house, she's the coach, but she says that she actually had better tools when she was just involved with travel volleyball with her kids. So I thought that's a really interesting way to put this. So tell us about Kith and Kin, and maybe briefly about that, but then I want to hear about how you got there, your previous experience and your life and what brought you to this point.
Yeah, well, thanks so much for having me. So, Kith and Kin's an old-fashioned term for friends and family because we know that there's no one way that people care for the people they care about. And, back to the earlier comment, health is a team sport, and we really haven't treated it as such for many, many decades. And I think we're just starting to realize the impact of people's support structure. And, for me, it started down this journey when I was sitting at yet another of thousands of health conferences with people talking about adherence, right? Getting people to do what they're supposed to do. And I'm sitting in the audience and I'm listening to people talk about, they got to take their pills and they have to do this and they have to do that. And they're like, and the role of doctors and pharmacists and therapists. And I'm sitting there in the audience going, do you people understand that job is actually mine, right?
Right.
I'm the one who does that because
right.
I'm the mom. If you want someone to do it, you can give them all the instructions you want. But if you really want somebody to do it, you tell their mother.
Right.
So that's kind of how the organization was born, and figuring out, really how to empower the Kinkeeper and give them the tools that they need.
There is some overlap with a guest we've had on the show who I know you know, Glenna Crooks.
Absolutely. I was just talking to Glenna yesterday.
Very excellent. So I think I helped reconnect you two because she talks about the network that everyone has, not just healthcare, but everything. She inspired me to talk to my 90-year-old mother about, with my brothers, because we didn't know who all her doctors were, but weren't really sure who her hairdresser was these days, or, all the people that she relies on. Some of them we knew, some of them we didn't know. So we decided we needed to know that. But you take it a step further because there is a Kinkeeper. There is somebody in charge generally of that. And I think that's really interesting. So tell me about your life experience and your work experience that brought you to this place of founding this company, Kith and Kin.
Yeah. So I always say, like, from a professional standpoint, right? I'm very eclectic on paper. I'm a closet CPA by trade. I spent 8 years in public accounting, mostly in the healthcare and social service sector. But then I spent the next 14 years at United Way. And I loved that work. I loved the people. I loved that experience. It's where I really was able to connect, kind of back to you, made that comment in my bio, really at the human, at the center of the journey, and where I spent so much of my career trying to figure out how to push the boulder uphill. You want to talk about resilience? Work in the social service sector for 14 years trying to change systems, right? And somebody even asked me recently, they're like, really, you couldn't pick anything easier than consumer healthcare, right? You had to pick the one thing in healthcare that's probably arguably the most difficult. And I said, I don't know, I feel like my whole life has kind of prepared me for this willingness to push so hard on systems and being willing to celebrate just that crack and that start of that change. because that's really what it is in this space. It's been about creating tipping points, and that's been a lot of my career, a lot of my life.
So that brings up a few questions I have. One, so obviously you had some challenges along the way. And I know that you've had to have a lot of resilience. And I know some of the way you live your life was inspired by your mother and the story, the end of her life and what happened.
Yeah, absolutely.
Maybe want to talk about that and how you handle challenges.
Yeah. So my mom passed away when I was in my mid-20s. She actually had breast cancer when I was probably at that point maybe 5. Wow. And she made it through that. And which was amazing because at the time, not a lot of people made it through that. And I was thankful to have had her for another over 20 years. But she passed away. She had what they call T-cell lymphoma, which is like lymphoma is like 5% of cancers, and T-cell lymphoma is 5% of lymphoma. Right. So there wasn't a lot of research. There wasn't a lot to be able to really to have hope for at that point when we kind of started down that path, and we knew that that's what it was. But I took a leave of absence from my work at the time in public accounting. I took a 3-month leave of absence. She went into the hospital on my birthday in July, and she passed the week before my first anniversary in October. Wow. But I spent those 3 months, I slept in that hospital every day because I didn't want to have any regrets. That was kind of the moment for me where I said, I'm not going to have any regrets. That's not the way I want to live my life. I want to say everything that needs to be said. And I want to do things the way I want to do them and the things that I believe should be done. Not all the things that society says that should be done, right? Because, there's a lot of, I tell people a lot of times when they're feeling that kind of anxiety and pressure, I'm like, you got to just shed the shoulds. People are going to should all over you and tell you all the things that you're supposed to be doing in one way or another. But the reality is, you've got to do the things that won't put you in the position in the future to regret the decisions you make today.
So that was a struggle, and you were 25 at the time, so you were pretty young. So to come to that conclusion that you would have no regrets at 25, a lot of people don't come to that conclusion until much later, if they ever do in their lives. So so you were very fortunate, like you said, to have your mother all that time and to have that experience with her and to be able to spend all that time to think about it and to come to that conclusion. That's pretty amazing. Tell us a little bit about what Kith and Kin can do for people listening to our show, how you help them.
Yeah, absolutely. So Kith and Kin is it's an app that basically helps you manage what we, if I can say this on the air, we affectionately refer to as show of managing health information, right? So the stuff that you've got in text and emails, notes on your phone, documents you download from your very secure patient portal and email to yourself so that you can find them later. All of that information, we spent over 1,000 hours just talking to people before we wrote a single line of code because we've spent 20 plus years trying to build consumer healthcare tools from the system back instead of from the human forward. And so we just started to talk to people and tell me how you do this today. People are like, I take pictures, I make notes, I store documents. I don't love to fill out forms. There's no NA in my binder. There's no NA in my life, right? So we just started to kind of build a solution that actually mirrors the way people do things, right? Mm-hmm. They make quick notes. They take pictures of everything from rashes to discharge procedures, right? They do very simple behaviors, and we want all of that information to be able to be in one place at your fingertips and in your control. Back to your conversation with Glenna, right? That it's about sharing the right information with the right people, because the reality is people said also, I need all that information. Oh, but by the way, I share some information with some people and other information with other people. And I need a solution that helps me do that.
And you can do that.
And you can do that with Kith and Kin, right? So
That's
you
great.
get to choose who has access to what.
And how are you doing with subscription? I imagine.
Yep. It's a subscription. We just went to market at the end of 2022. We have our first almost 5,000 users. And now we're kind of out in the market looking at B2B partnerships, folks who are able to help us get the word out and be able to build, whether it's patient groups, family groups, organizations. That's the stage we're at today.
That's wonderful. So, and how about in this business in particular, what challenges have you faced?
Yeah, so I alluded to it a little bit, right? So consumer health is not for the faint of heart, right? So I said I'm going to get T-shirts made that has who cares on the front and who pays on the back because they seem to never meet in healthcare, right? Because you have this space of, there's this, I would say right now, it's an amazing time to be in the space enabling that person we call the Kinkeeper. We use that term deliberately, interestingly, because I will say there's part of the challenge is most people who are in a role of quote unquote caregiver don't refer to themselves as a caregiver, right? If you've got, if you're the parent of a kid with special needs or you're the adult child of an aging parent, you don't define yourself as a caregiver, right? You're a kid, you're a parent, you're someone, who's taking care of a loved one. But so being able to kind of build this ecosystem around these folks who are sitting in these roles has been incredibly challenging because there's not an economic model to support that.
That's very helpful to hear that. And we're going to continue in this conversation right after our...
It's no secret when it comes to being able to confidently manage health, information is everything. Unfortunately, most people learn the hard way that managing health information can be overwhelming, exhausting, and even isolating. We see you, the Kinkeeper, the one playing air traffic control for all the appointments and reminders and central intelligence, making sure everyone knows what they need to know when they need to know it. We created Kith and Kin for you to securely create, organize, and share health information for all of your loved ones, all in one place. Visit kithandkin.app to sign up today and become a more empowered advocate for those you care for and about.
We are back on Founders Forum with our guest today, Jill Michal, and Ange Honorado is here. Ange, I've been asking all the questions. Do you have anything you'd like to talk to Jill about?
Oh, well, as always, Mark, I sit back in the wings sometimes and just hear and think a lot of really interesting things. And I love this so much because, obviously I'm sitting here going, my whole family, we need this app. So I can't wait to get started on it. But
success, you got one more subscriber today. So.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's just so needed. And I love how you're addressing your target audience and your clients and the external facing folks. I'm also curious about, how have you built the company on the inside in terms of, how would you describe the culture? How do you attract people? What type of person do you look for? And in today's workforce is very different. I've been in the recruiting space for many, many years and the executive leadership space. So I'm just curious, what's working for you and how do you see this growth from a team development culture perspective, moving down the road?
Yeah, it's interesting that you started this session with the conversation about resilience, right? Because that's one of the things I look for in folks, a fundamental belief in what we're doing and the perseverance and resilience to get it done. Because I will never bring someone into our organization and say, come on in, this is easy. This is easy, it'll be a cakewalk and, you won't have to wake up every day and need to push through. I bring people into this organization who fundamentally believe that what we are doing is so important, but also understand that this is going to take time. If we were able to really solve the quote unquote consumer healthcare crisis, right, and the challenges of this person in a Kinkeeper or caregiver role, we would have done it in the last 20 years. It's going to take individuals and organizations really trying to deeply understand the human. So I'm always looking for people who actually care about that very deeply personal journey. They have a personal story. They're engaged. They have a belief system that matters. But from a culture standpoint, I'm always looking for people who care more about getting it right than about being right. That's what's driven every team that I've ever worked on. And that's mattered to me, probably more than almost anything.
That's wonderful. You have a lot of great expressions, and I know they're kind of your guiding principles. And one of them we talked about, and we were talking about resilience for you personally, was that you love to do things in the face of fear. And you had another quote around that. Do you remember that one about behaviors?
Yeah. Somebody gave me some really, really great advice. At this point, it's probably almost 20 years ago, and said, never forget that you can't talk yourself out of something you've behaved yourself into. Right. And so those words have lived with me forever because, you can put posters on the wall about your vision and your values. But your integrity is what you do when nobody's watching, right? And so being able to be in that space and constantly have to ensure that your behaviors are 100% aligned with your belief system and what you tell people you believe has really mattered to me personally over the years. Because you watch far too many folks who tell you something, right? And then behave in a totally different way. And there's, that's just, it creates a lot of inconsistencies and a lot of lack of organizational clarity. And, for me, back to the no regrets. Right. I don't have enough time to be one person some days. I sure as heck can't be two people.
Right. So it sounds like you have the right people in place at this point.
Yeah, absolutely. I have amazing people who are passionate, committed, consistent, always deliver, but very clearly deeply care and are mutually accountable, right? Because I think it's, it's easy to manage people who report to you. But I've always said leaders are people who can lead people who have the choice not to follow them.
Right.
And so I love that, we've got a lot of leaders.
How do you find them? Because I'm sure, because everybody, finding good employees is very difficult out there today, and let alone leaders that you're finding. How do you do? What's your secret to that?
Yeah, it's I really start with the mission of the organization. As Pollyanna as that may sound, I need to know that you actually care about what we're doing, and that you don't believe that this is just a kind of a slam dunk day in, day out, or it's just a job, because I'm not going to be able to fill your bucket every day for you. You're going to have to come in here and make sure that you're coming in fueled by the fact that you believe that what we're doing is so fundamentally important. You're going to push through. You're going to push through the fear. You're going to push through the things that are going to go wrong any day. And so you have to be able to have that. You have to be able to have that at your core. And I think that allows you that and that personal level of accountability. When I see that in folks, and I typically have a relationship with people before they work with me, relationship, I'll call it loosely, right? It may not have been years or decades, right? But I have a sense of who they are as a person. And that's made it a lot easier for me to find the right people and the people that I want to spend time with. Because let's face it, when you're in this kind of business, you spend a lot of time with your people.
Well, it sounds like you say those things to people up front, and then pretty quickly if they're not one of those, I would imagine.
100%. I mean, I will say that to people anytime. I was just talking to somebody last week, and I said, look, we were talking about bringing in somebody on the sales side. And I said, I need somebody who's going to put their shoulder to this boulder all day long, and you're going to know it's not going to be easy. And if that's not for you, that's okay. That is not the job for everybody. But you got to know that coming in, right? And you've got to know what we're up against in this space.
I think that's such a critical part. You're almost like an ideal recruiting client, because I can't tell you how many clients don't do that in their hiring process, and then it doesn't work out, and then they're blaming their recruiter or whatever. I think that's so important to embody and represent your value even up front before the first interview. So I love to hear companies that take that approach.
We have only 3 minutes left, believe it or not. This time flies when you're having fun like this, and this has been a really fun show. Jill, I know you have a future vision for your company. If you were looking out 10 years from today and looking back, what would have to happen in your company and I suppose in your life for you to feel like that was a successful 10-year period?
I would look, my dream is that everybody feels confident in being a consumer of health, and that 10 years from now, no matter where you are, you're dealing with you're just dealing with your kids' day-to-day health issues, or you're dealing with, unfortunately, some kind of severe or chronic condition. that you're able to show up and lean in and be a first-class citizen in your healthcare, that you have the information you need, you have the confidence you need. The idea that, healthcare is stressful enough, but if health information doesn't have to be that way, you can show up, you can lean in, you can truly be a true participant in that journey. It's going to change the game. It's going to fundamentally make those outcomes different, and it's going to make us feel different, both as consumers of health, but really as impactful and empowered advocates for the people we care for and about.
So can your app do that? Because I think you would also need the providers and the insurance companies to cooperate for that to happen as well.
Yeah, I think you need a whole ecosystem, right? So in this space, for me, the vision is to create a different kind of ecosystem around caregiving than we have around others. And notice intentionally ecosystem, not set of silos. This is not a volume play, right? This is this work, this next evolution to achieve that vision. The whole has to be greater than the sum of its parts.
Well, it's an amazing vision. You're literally changing the world with what you're trying to do, and I know you're very passionate about it, and I believe you will do it. We were talking earlier, you have an interesting way to look at success. How do you define success, Jill?
Yeah, for success for me is knowing what makes you happy and being happy when you have that. And that sounds easy.
Right.
It's so not.
Right. I understand that. And we were talking about, is that a destination or is that a journey? It's a little bit of both, I would imagine.
Absolutely. I also think it's a state of mind, right? Because some days you're going to feel successful, some days you're not.
Right.
But you have to be able to choose happiness some days, and that's not not always easy. But it's to me, it's what matters more than almost anything.
That's great. Jill, you've said a lot today. We've covered a lot of ground, and I've written down several of your quotes. I'm going to use them because you got a lot of great sort of guiding posts on that. So thank you for being here. It really is a pleasure. And everybody, check out Kith and Kin. We don't usually do that, but I do think this is something that everybody can benefit from because everybody is caring for somebody in some way or another. Thanks so much. Thanks for listening to Founders Forum, and we'll see you again next week.
You enjoyed your time with Founders Forum today, and you found value to take with you throughout your day. Join us again next week for another episode of Founders Forum on WWDB Talk Radio.